You just press play on the Last Breath Huntcast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it. Big buck down, big buck down. Welcome to episode number 68 of the Last Breath Huntcast. We are talking about a buck we just killed called K2 and how we just seem to get so damn lucky over the last 3 years of killing deer with a decoy. We got a little bit of a hot streak rolling right now with using a decoy, and more importantly than the story, we're going to kind of go ahead and dive into the tactics that we use and how we have been able to do this for the last few years running with a decoy. And it's been working out really well for us. So again, this is episode number 68. Sorry for my hiccupy noises here. I'm drinking a little bit of beer right now. So my guest today is sitting right across from me. He's not really my guest. He's more of a co-host, and that would be Garrett. Hello.
How we doing, everybody? This is going to be a phenomenal podcast. Yeah, buddy. We're going to talk about K2, your third deer that you have decoyed in and killed.
Not you, well, us.
Well,
I've just been the one that gets to be on the end of the boat.
Either way, there's some really interesting stuff to talk about. The deer is awesome, and given when we killed him in the peak of the heat wave of early November, it's interesting. So I know this podcast is a little late. Most of you have probably seen this on social media. We're just kind of pounding it out as we've got our rutcation going right now. We're trying to make sure that we don't fall behind and we can give you guys fresh content. So here we go. Go ahead and open it up. I mean, there's nothing else that needs to be said. This is a freaking awesome deer, and how it happened was pretty cool too.
Yeah, so before we jump in, reminder that every episode you can listen to, new episode of our Huntcast every Monday on Libsyn, Spotify, iTunes, etc. And you can watch it on YouTube on Tuesdays. You can watch our Last Breath Lives on Wednesdays, Throwback Thursdays on Thursdays. We've just got a ton of good content coming down the pipeline, and we would really, really appreciate it if you guys could go and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you already haven't, but we know that most of our friends that listen to this podcast already have. So this is a pretty cool episode, given the fact that we're getting pretty okay at killing deer with a decoy now. The setup, I think it's been working really, really well. And we're going to go ahead and get into the story of it. So a little bit of backstory. We rattled in our third buck the other day on November 5th in a 3-year stretch here using a decoy. And our questions that I kind of want to go over is what decoy setup kind of seems to work the best for us, the positioning of the decoy itself, the way it's looking, the positioning based on the tree and the wind, the type of decoy we're using, and the story. So we'll jump into the story first. So little bit of backstory. Our best farm struck with the HD. It's on kind of a back burner year, I would call it. We've got 2 very, very, very big 4-year-olds over there that we just haven't hunted at all. A host of pretty good 3-year-olds and a couple new random bucks showing up that are 3/4. We don't know. I'd love to be able to tell you guys that we do, but we're waiting and managing that farm for 5-year-old deer so that we can kill bucks like Lucky and Geronimo every year out there. So we have to wait 1 more year to hunt it as hard as we normally do. And so that pushes us to our second spot, which we call the Heartbeat Farm. That's a deer that we call the Heartbeat Farm because we kill any deer that gets our heart bumping, right? So any deer that's, looks mature, it's got a nice set of antlers on him, we're going to pull the trigger on. And obviously does too. So getting into the story, most of you guys have experienced the same thing during the Midwest rut. Starting in October 31st, it was cold, cold, cold. And then on the 3rd of November, it got hot. What do we mean by hot? We mean unseasonably hot here in northern Illinois. Usually during this time of the year, it's about 25 to 30 degrees at night. And during the daytime, the highs reach 45, and on hot years, it'll be 55. But this year, it was highs in the 70s, 75, 76. Actually, this morning, Logan and Allie killed a buck, and the high daytime temperature was supposed to be 76, 77 degrees here in Illinois. So unseasonably warm weather for the rut, which is what people all over the Midwest are experiencing, and even in the South. You know, most of the southern hunters, I was talking about Pete with this the other day. I said, what's the average temperature you guys are hunting in down there in Louisiana. He's like, yeah, it's no thing for us to be hunting when it's 80 or 90 degrees out, but now it's really hot out, given this time of year. So everybody's experiencing it, and we've been getting our ass kicked for the whole beginning half of our rutcation, just playing cat and mouse with our number 1 and number 2 deer. And about 2 weeks before our rut, the last week of October, we have this buck show up called K2. We named him K2 generically because of the kicker off of his back left G2 on his antler. That's how he earned his name. Big deer, tall antlers, big kicker. Really proud to have shot him. That's how he got his name. We get this deer on camera, and he's roaming everywhere, right? And this farm that we're hunting is how big?
It's 380 acres. It's our biggest lease we've ever had, biggest farm we've ever had to hunt. And as Grant said and alluded to, we noticed that specific areas just seem to geographically kind of compartmentalize deer. And with this guy, it's like, man, this night, boom, he's on the south side. Then the next night he's on the west side. And then the following night he's on both of our mobile cameras out there. And, these mobile cams are 900 yards apart. So we just knew that this was one of those deer that everybody experiences either every year or traditionally. That buck that arrives in November, he's there for 10 days, 2 weeks, and boom, he's gone. And given that, he was on the list, but we weren't ever going to a stand to hunt this deer. We just knew, man, he might show up.
He could show up at any time.
Because he's everywhere. So the coolest thing about him, I think, is the fact that he was frequenting us so much, and man, he is tall. He sits really well up high off his heads. The night before Grant killed him, he had his other brow tine, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, fresh white break off. So when he harvested him, he did break that right brow tine, but his kicker was the signature of him. He's got it's not just a straight kicker. It's got a little bit of meat to it. It's a little bit of blade to it.
It's got like a point growing up off the top of it, and another point that looks like maybe he rubbed off in velvet that could have been something. It's just a bladed, tall, pretty heavy deer.
Great deer. So I guess as Grant said, our rutcation, when we started it was still decent. Grant actually had a couple encounters with 2 mature deer before then, which is unique because typically the first time we encounter a deer, we kill him. And mind you that we're talking about an encounter and not an opportunity. What we consider an encounter is seeing him within 100 yards. And the first deer we saw, we still don't know who he was. Just a solid deer. Like we never got a good look at him. He was in the brush.
Looked like a 9 or a 10. Not really sure what.
And then the second one was Twix. And we were hunting just that dangerous wind, just off wind. And we had that little kick of west that ended that. He was coming in perfectly. I mean, you shot him at 24, 25 yards. And that wind just kicked out of the west just enough to put him on freeze. He locked up at 50 yards and turned around and walked exactly where he came from. Yep. So fast forward then to the opportunity on K2 the morning of.
Yep.
I'll let you talk about what we did because we moved that stand. And why we did it, and then our decoy placement, the same strategy that we've used the last 3 years with how we place the decoy. And you said we rattled him in, but it was like a combination of calls. It's not like we blind rattled this deer in. And I think it's important to really say, like, okay, we were set up here because of this point, and then when we saw him, this is what we did to bring him into 17 yards.
Yeah. So basically, the way we feel about it and the spot that we picked is during the rut, this particular farm has a field on it that I would almost say looks like a paintball if you shoot it at something hard. It just looks like there's fingers of this field going everywhere. It's not your monocrop, square, or rectangular big piece of agriculture that's like type A soil. It's hill country, and there's fingers of this big agricultural field that kind of run everywhere. So our strategy and our thought behind going to this particular stand, it was the stand that we hanged and hunted last year when we killed a buck we called Teeter. Kind of the same strategy, almost a similar looking buck. Big tall 8, kicker off the back left 2 again. People are going to come to my house and be like, why'd you get the shed mount of that deer? And I'll be like, no, believe it or not, these are 2 separate deer. But so we picked there to see not necessarily because it's a rut funnel, but because there are a bunch of converging fingers there that kind of all lay out into this field. And if there is a buck, quote unquote, cruising, we stood a good chance to potentially see him there, jumping from finger to finger. And then with our decoy right below our stand, placed where we want it, we could have an opportunity to sight call to the deer. So we had hung the stand up 2 days before, hunted it once, saw a couple of deer come in there, a couple young bucks come in there, and worked perfectly. Came and circled downwind, which we'll talk about our decoy setup in coordinates with the wind in just a second. But they came, circled downwind of the decoy, and they caught our wind like per usual, to be expected. But our strategy and our thought behind it is we're going to set our decoy in our scent cone, and when the deer reaches it, we'll be able to kill him. Right. When he can nail us, we can nail him, kind of thing.
I think I'll let you continue, but I do think it's important, as Grant was describing where we're at. We're probably arguably on one of the highest points on our farm. And with this decoy strategy, it's putting ourselves in a position to see very far. We can see and observe a lot of ground. Mm-hmm. And when I say, like, I bet in one direction we've got 500 yards line of sight, the other one 300, and that's within our field that we're hunting. Yep. And then all the way across the other bluff, I mean, we can probably see close to 1,000 yards. Now, though those deer were not calling, but we can just see a lot of ground. And inversely, it also gives us the opportunity for a deer to see our decoy as well. Yep. We're not hunting in like a small pocket cove or a little food plot. It's the exact opposite. We're in one of the most exposed parts of the farm.
Out in the middle of the wide open in all intents and purposes.
We're in the timber, like we're on a tree, tip of the finger.
Yep.
But the decoy is like sticking out there like a sore thumb.
Yep, absolutely. And basically what we did, we set the decoy up. We climb up the tree, and being as though the time has changed, now everybody's experiencing time change. First light is now at like 5-something instead of 6-something, and the sunrise, instead of being at about 7:30, it's about 6:30, 6:20. So when we get first light, we rattle. We waited about, 40 minutes like we usually do, 30, 40 minutes, and we rattle again. I don't know, blind rattling, that's a controversy in and of itself, but we believe in it. We do it all the time.
Especially with a decoy. And nothing happened in the second sequence.
And we're sitting there, and it's about 7:15, and I'm turned to Garrett, and we're talking about, man, this weather sucks. It's hotter than shit.
Literally, I was looking at, like, we drop pins on properties where we want to go ask for permission because this farm we're so happy to have it, so blessed, but the numbers are just so low. Like a good day on this farm is seeing like 5 deer. That's a good day. I want you to know that multiple days in early November this year, we were goose egged.
Yep.
Like, and I don't want to say like we're better than not getting skunked, but man, in the heart of the rut, you would think you would, I mean, we're talking like all day, you would see a deer. So back onto what you were saying, we're sitting there talking about this sucks.
Yep, and we're sitting there, and we've seen a couple young bucks come through, a doe group way out. And I'm turned facing Garrett, and he's turned facing me. So the original way that I'm supposed to be monitoring is being monitored by him because he's looking at me and like over into my zone of vision if I were to be sitting down, and the same likewise for him. And I think he's messing with me originally because at this point it's about 60-something degrees, and it's hot, and the wind is blowing pretty good at a good clip, which is we found never to be a help for deer movement, at least. And he looks over my shoulder, and he goes, "Big buck, K2 on the hill." And so I get my binoculars up on the hill, and I'm like glassing this hill, and I'm like, holy shit, Garrett's fucking with me because I can't see him on the quote-unquote hill. Come to figure out he's on the top of the hill, which is what Garrett meant. I just didn't understand what he meant at that point.
You were looking like at the 100-yard range, and he was closer to like 220, 200 when he came out.
Yeah, so he's way out there, pretty far out. And like immediately as I'm like spinning around to look, I hear Garrett like snort wheeze like, and I haven't even like turned around to see the deer yet. Like immediately he's like, K2, big buck K2, and I spin around, and then he kind of is standing there, and he stands there I only see him for about 10 seconds before he boogies into the woods, and we have our rattle antlers in the little crotch of the tree in between us, And I sit down, reach for my bow. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's going to come right as Teeter did last year. Grab my bow in my hand. Garrett rattles. And it's about 90 seconds, I would say. So he goes into the timber. He walks what I'm assuming, or jogs, through the timber up to about 100 yards away from us now. So he's cut the distance in half in about 60, 90 seconds. And I see him. He comes out the exact same trail as Teeter. The difference is that if you guys have seen the deer we call Teeter, that's the one I shot last year over a decoy. Teeter kind of circled out and around to the north. And what this deer did is he circled out and around to the south, hugged the edge of our finger, and then wrapped the finger of the point that we were sitting at. So this deer comes out the same spot, and where Teeter tried to immediately posture up and sidestep and go at our decoy, he went down and then cut around the tip of our finger, which is pointing towards like the northeast. And so he comes from like directly east of us, circles down to the south a little bit, and then hugs our finger. So I grab my bow. I'm like, well, he's hugging the tip. He's going to be at like 20 yards. My pin was already rolled to the top at 20 because our decoy's at 17 yards. That's where we put him. Picturing, a deer to come downwind of him for about a 20 to 25 yard shot, which a 20 pin would be fine for either. So we're like, okay, if it works out, it's supposed to work. This will be where we go. So he comes down, he starts marching in. His ears are pulled back. He's postured up like he's, for all intents and purposes, if I think we would have let him just like Teeter, I think he would have came in and blew the decoy up.
Especially this deer, because he wasn't downwind of the decoy. He stayed to the timber side. He was downwind of us, but not of the decoy.
Yeah.
So before we get to the shot, I'll tell everybody my perspective, right? So Grant and I are facing each other. That's why I saw the deer, because we're talking. And K2 pops up out of the one finger, and he's going to cut across to the other one. So he's on a good clip. He's trotting, just like cruising deer are. He's not meandering. He's not being slow. So I'm like, crap, there he is. I pull my binoculars out. Boom, recognize exactly who the deer is. He's on the hit list. And Grant's trying to find him. He's not. And at this point, Teeter's made it halfway across the gap from finger to finger. So I need to make sure that he sees the decoy. And that's why I threw out the wheeze. We grunted. I gave him a grunt. He didn't hear it because he was on the move and he's far away. Gave him the wheeze. Boom. He gets visual confirmation of the decoy. And then he starts going down in elevation into the ditch because timber's in low-lying areas.
Yep.
And as soon as he hits there, I grab the antlers, and I don't do a full rattle. I just smash him and shake him. Like I said, I just smash and shake. It's a very quick sequence. It's not much, but I just wanted to...
It's like 4 seconds.
Paint the picture for him.
Cha-cha-cha. That's it.
Yep. Put him up, and then that's when he pops out. So he had visual confirmation, audible confirmation multiple times potentially that there was a deer over here and they're defending something. So now we're going to resume back to where he is committed. He's within 25 yards but not quite to the window.
Yep. So he comes out of the same point. He circles to the south. He's at about 40 yards now through some brush. I clip my release on. I don't need to pick up my rangefinder because he's hugging the timber. He's walking at a pace of about step, 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 step. So he's walking. He's not being cautious, I will say. He's not being cautious. He's a buck coming in to rumble with another buck. And he's stepping around the corner of the timber and he pauses, gives the decoy a look at about 15, 20 yards away. And
he was further than that. He wasn't 15 or 20 yards when he looked at him.
You're probably right. Probably
like 25.
30 maybe.
Yeah.
So he looks at the decoy. And at this point, I'm drawn back because he was behind cover. I draw back. So at the whole course of the interaction, I was probably drawn back for 40, 45 seconds maybe. He comes, steps around, and he stops. And for Garrett, he looks like beautiful, like the footage always does. But for me, as I'm about a critical 1.5 feet away from Garrett with a different vantage point, I'm a little lower and also further around the tree than he is by a bit. He's behind something, and I can't shoot. But he stopped. That's the key distinction here. And now he keeps stepping, and now he's in the lane. So as soon as his vitals clear the big tree on the right side of our lane, we've got a shooting lane that's about 8 yards wide from right to left. And this deer's about 20 yards. And I stop, and I'm anchored in, and I stop him. Matt.
You try
to stop him. Matt. Nothing. Matt. Nothing again. So at this point, I've tried to stop him twice, and keep in mind we're at 20 yards. So deer, I would have thought shot have hurt us, right? Because we stopped deer before and killed them before, and things like that. And this deer hadn't stopped yet. I give him a third mant. He still is motoring. The fourth mant happens, and at this point, he's all the way at the left side, and the left side of the hole, which is there's a big tree there, not a big tree, but like a foot tree. You know, I can't shoot through with branches on it. And then there's the next hole with our decoy in it. And by the time that he would have got to our decoy, I don't know if I could have shot him without him catching our wind. He was very close to being able to catch our wind. I feel like
not even that. I think to let the listeners
and he's close to the decoy, like he's about ready to lunge.
Yes. That's the big thing. So we left this walnut tree in front of us for cover. So we didn't literally have like a 25-yard just hole in the timber. So for this scenario, from a deer coming from right and working left, we had the lane the Grant shot K2 in. And from deer that come from the left and work their way right is the other hole.
With the decoy in the edge of it.
Right. So if Grant would have waited, there's a high probability that he would have literally blown the decoy up, because Grant would have had maybe a foot from his angle to where he could shoot before contact was made with the decoy.
Yep. So he's just a couple yards away from the decoy at this point, and I let out my fourth mant, which sounded like at the fourth one was pretty freaking loud.
And
like
it was fast,
pretty
too.
loud.
It was fast too. I don't want you to think it was strung out.
Mant.
Yeah.
And he still didn't move, and I touched one off. Now, when I touch one off, like I said, so a little bit of math on the backstory of this. So we're 20 feet away, which is 60 feet. Now, if I'm shooting a 300 foot per second arrow at 60 feet, then that means it took 0.2 of a second to get there. And I did the math and figured out how far an arrow could travel back in 0.2 of a second. And I figured out that if the deer was walking about 2 miles an hour, I'm like, yeah, that's a fair amount. Like, he was probably walking about 2 miles an hour. I think he would have continued in a straight line. He would have been about 2 miles away if he would have kept going at that rate, maybe 3 miles an hour. And I did the math, and it ended up being about 14 inches he could have moved in that amount of time. And sure as shit, that's pretty much what happened. So I held it on the lungs. Apparently, I should have held it on the shoulder, but I ended up hitting the paunch and clipping the liver. Luckily, thank God we clipped the liver. And like I said, I tried to stop the deer about 4 times, and I don't know if I regret, I guess, taking the shot. I don't know what the solution is there, because I think if I let him walk, then he either A, blows up the decoy and catches our wind,
and catches our wind.
The
moral of the story is
I just don't know.
It's another lesson of hard knocks, and thankfully there's a happy ending to this lesson. But you know, I do think that deer under 25 yards you can shoot if they're walking. You just have to understand, as your math was calculated, the distance that the arrow will miss hit, right?
Yeah, about foot and a half.
So, you know, this scenario happens again. You know to hold it right at the shoulder. You shoot, it falls into the breadbasket. Because I genuinely think that if you would have waited and thought that he would have made it to the second lane, that we would have had great footage and heartbreak. That he would have either A, winded us and bolted, B, hit the decoy and bolted, or C, a combination of two. Very high probable chance. Is there an off chance that, yeah, the deer doesn't hit him or doesn't wind us?
Yeah, that could happen.
But minimal. I mean, you took the shot, you killed the deer, and you learned from it. What more do you want, you know?
Yeah.
So you shoot, we hit it back, and immediately we know, like, literally in the video, you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
you knew, we both knew, not good. I mean,
it's back.
We played the video, we assessed it, we marked exactly in our minds mentally where he ran, and we stayed in the stand for about 30 minutes just to make sure it was plenty quiet, grabbed the decoy, and
got down, get out immediately.
Didn't even look for blood, didn't go to the field edge, none of that stuff.
Nope, but we did notice a key piece of distinction and information on our video. And that was that, number one, got a pass through, he kicked the arrow out. Number two, there was a good flash of red blood on his exit side. And not that I'm defending the shot whatsoever. I just wish he would have stopped. I think the shot felt good. I just should have moved it more towards the front of his body. But I've been going back and forth in my mind about that, and I'm like, well, shit, what if he stopped then? Then I suppose I would have just whacked him in the shoulder, and with the arrows set up and the poundage that I'm pulling, the broadhead that I'm shooting, I probably just smashed right through the shoulder anyway. So I wish that would have happened. However, given the shot, we saw a big flash of red on his offside on his exit. And we're like, okay, a gut shot deer, that wouldn't happen. So we got the liver, but we're skeptical of it because obviously we can't break down footage in the stand like that. And both of us know, like, mid-body, up and down, great height, but it's just back. It's further back than what we would have liked. So we go back, get down, assess the footage, talk to a couple of my buddies, and then we go back. We waited 8 full hours, so we shot him at 7:20, and we waited till 3 o'clock to leave your house. So we would have got to our farm at about 3:20, 3:30, and then we take up the blood trail, go to the spot in which we saw him run into the timber, and started looking for blood. And immediately we've got like dark red blood, which is an indication of like a liver shot, right? We find the arrow, we start working up the trail, and
we're following probably drops of blood anywhere from dime size to number 2 pencil eraser sized. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's consistent, and we can see blood brushed on the weeds on his offside. So it's not like we're aimlessly following nothing or just little pin droplets. There are drops of blood. It's not like, it's walk at steady pace tracking.
No.
But yeah,
it's not like lung or heart shot, but it's not like bad.
Yeah, we're not going off anything. Yeah.
It's not like we at any point lost the blood.
Nope.
So consistently bleeding, and then about 80 yards down the trail from the field edge, I see it like a shiny, an angle of a deer. Like, you got to figure it was about 4 o'clock at that time, so the sun was kind of hitting down, and kind of a deer, their coat kind of looks a little bit shiny in the afternoon or in the evening, and that's exactly what it looked like. And I was like, holy shit, that's a deer on its side laying there dead. And we went up and recovered him, and that was that.
It was awesome, yeah.
It was awesome.
Shout out to Matt for coming down to help us. That guy is your lucky tracking dog.
No doubt.
Matt shot Chubbs, obviously a beautiful deer, and he's like, hey, I'd love to be there when you find it. Love to help you guys. So it was cool. And for everybody that's wondering, less than ideal shot from point of impact to where he laid, it was about 280 yards.
On the windy track, so it was 190 yards on the straight line from our stand to death. And our footsteps is
from where he ran, because we followed blood. So that just gives people a reference. He died in his first bed. He actually died on all fours on the trail. Like, he just, like, he ran. I think, honestly, he ran there from shot, and he laid down, and he died.
Yep, and he was stiff when we found him about 8 hours after the shot, 7.5, 8 hours. So I'm guessing he probably died in 4-ish.
Yeah.
Died in that first bed.
We made the right decision. We gave him plenty of time. When in doubt, back out. We decided going in there that we were going to go 250 yards, and that if we didn't recover him in 250 yards, we were going to wait until the next morning. So we had some ground rules placed, to make sure we didn't bump him or push him. And it worked out great, except for the field dressing.
Oh, boy. Let me tell you what.
This is the number one reason for you guys to join the Inner Circle. So Grant's got a weak stomach already, and Matt decided to go live when we were dressing this deer out because he was suspicious of Grant dry heaving or puking. It's just something, Grant, it is what it is. It would have been hilarious. So Grant dressed the deer just fine, and when he was like, we got him opened up, he'd cut the esophagus, and he's getting ready to pull everything out the back.
Which, in Matt's defense, he thought probably, this is going to be funny because Grant's going to start dry heaving because, like I said, it was a paunch, like, guts area shot in the liver. And so it's like, this is going to be a messier gut job on the non-vital side of that membrane, the membrane that you cut separating the heart, lungs, liver between the guts and the intestines, stomach area. So Matt was thinking that. And he's right, because what had happened was got through the field dressing part, got all the things out, cut the esophagus, I hooked my middle finger in, the membrane between the vitals and non-vitals is cut, and we're to the point where we're doing the quote-unquote clean pull-out, where you grab by the esophagus and you pull it out. Well, son of a bitch, it was kind of dark. It was, I would say, about 5 minutes before I couldn't see anymore, so I was already kind of like squinty. That kind of type of evening, the type of evening when it's a hot and less than ideal time of hunting, you're like, I can't really see my pin, but I can kind of keep doing this. But I pull it out, and I feel this warm rush of like hot liquid hit my face. And turned out what had happened was when I was pulling it out, there must have been pressure from the vitals sitting on top of the bladder that it squirted out, and it just drilled me right in the face. So then my eyes are burning. Garrett's like, what the hell?
I had no idea what happened. I had no idea. Grant like jumped back and he's like, what the heck? And I like turned the light up to him, and his face is literally dripping with buck piss. I like screamed at Matt because he had left.
Matt took our other light.
Grant didn't put on the show that Matt was expecting, so he was going to show off our Rutcation snack pile that we had, and missed it, came out, and you just, like I said, you literally see his entire face. What are the chances? I mean, I've heard of that happening before, like where it'll squirt out, but the chances of it having enough
being
pressure
a direct hit to the eyes,
to the face, is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, my left eye is what took it, and I would just describe it as like a super soaker, pumped up, the good ones that you can get at point blank range, just with frothy hot piss just drilling my left eye and spraying my right. So my eyes sting. Colin got tried to get a prescription to the doctor, and they were like, you probably you got an infection because the pee has ammonia in it, and ammonia is acidic,
they didn't say
and
it's going to burn. They just said it's
going to burn your eye. They said I didn't have an infection, and you'll be fine. But man, my eyes for the last like 3 or 4 days have hurt like bad. When I went back to school today and told my kids that story, they were like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
No.
They're looking at me like, "Yeah, this is fucking bullshit." But I was like, "Yeah, there's video. It sucked. It stung like a bitch." So anyway, that's pretty much the story of Teeter. Getting into the decoy system, getting into the decoy system that kind of works for us, I would just say that be cognizant of where your wind is. Position your decoy on one of the extremes of where your wind is blowing. For example, if you got a south wind, your scent cone's going to be like northwest to northeast. Put the decoy in the middle of the cone that gives you the best shot. Put it close enough if a deer circles downwind of it that it's not going to be a 50, 60-yard bomb. Make it reasonable. And put it in a high visibility place, and don't be afraid to call. So anyways, that's pretty much it. So the type of decoy we used was a DSD, Dave Smith decoy. Thank you again, Todd Carnes, for letting us borrow it. And that's pretty much it for this episode. We hope you guys really enjoyed it, and hopefully, if you're field dressing a deer out later this season, you do not also get a golden shower from a buck, because let me tell you, it stings like a mother. So, happy hunting. Keep grinding it out there. The gun seasons are opening up soon. We'll see you next Monday. Don't waste it.